Thank you. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:15 p.m. We'll now take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know. Amen. Okay. Thank you. I'll have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Dixon?
Present.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch? Here. Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we go any further, as always, I'd like to thank Rod and Connor, who are in the back working behind the scenes to produce our broadcasts on Channel 20 of our board meeting tonight. So thank you, gentlemen. So we will move on now to petitions and communications. I don't think we have any recognitions tonight. So we have one speaker tonight. We are now at the petitions and communications portion of our meeting when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communication portion of our agenda. According to our board policy, the public comments are limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to the comments at this time. If it's appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow for sufficient time for our business of the board and conduct our meetings in an efficient and effective manner, we are requesting that you comply with the guidelines that are posted, and each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such open meetings. We have a clock on the wall to help you with your 2 minutes. Thank you for your interest and your cooperation in the guidelines. We have one speaker tonight, Kawaya Jackson. If you'll go to the mic and hit the on button.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Hi, board. Thank you for allowing me to come back again. As you may recall, I'm the school zone lady, and I apologize for the recent absences. Life kind of got ahead of me these past few weeks, with school and stuff. But it happens to the best of us. So I've decided to introduce myself properly this time. So my name is Kawaya Jackson, but I prefer to be called Miss Jackson. And sorry for not introducing myself before. I guess I'm not good at this etiquette thing. But I'm a cheerleader. I have a 3.0 GPA. And that's just a title, But I wanted to discuss today how the school zones are affecting students at my school and at every other school. So, as you know, there was a lawsuit in the past, like 10, 15 years ago, and now we're back to our old ways. And the choice system didn't really work out because I noticed that everybody had a problem, but no one really had an answer, which isn't really fair to, the school district. But I just wanted to show you guys an example of why school zones should not be a thing. For example, I'm from Guilford. When I tell people that, they seem to look at me differently as if I were to say I'm from Auburn or another school, That's just a vernacular idea that people have in Rockford, as if we're separated. So we're all from Rockford, and we all live in Rockford, but I get a different look if I were to say from a different school, And even looking at this room, you can see, what type of people are coming here. They're, the age range, the races, other than black and white, what other races are here, the ethnicity changes. And so my brainstorming has led me to a solution that I think would be good. I don't know if anyone's really looking into this at the moment, but I am, and no one's really here to support me right now. But one thing that I came up with is I call it the 3-choice system. So a student living in one house would get to choose between 2 or 3 schools near them So that would solve the transportation problem. And it's a first come, first serve. So once that school is filled up, you have another choice. And after that, it's done. But if a student can supply their own transportation to a school that is open and they want to go there, then that was what I was going to say.
I'm going to ask you, since the 2 minutes are up, I'm going to ask you if you would just kind of summarize your final thoughts.
Right, okay.
Sure.
So I've learned to accept the things that I cannot change and change the things that I can and have the wisdom to know the difference, and I'll leave you with that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jackson. Thank you for being here. I will ask at this time if there are any board member comments. Mr. Siegel.
I just want to say that I appreciated having a really robust conversation about the student achievement the last few board meetings. I think we had a great opportunity to get more than just a snapshot of performance, factors that created that performance. And it was great that we were able to have this conversation in a public setting and just get a lot of great information out. So thank you, and I thought the conversation was great.
Ms. McCullough.
I'll tag on to you and say I was kind of negative, I know, but I do want to tell the administration how much I appreciate, and I said this in our district leadership team, but how much I appreciate work that went into putting it into a very easy to visualize, giving us the 4 years of information that we asked for. It obviously set us up for those negative conversations to have everything in one place, but do appreciate all the time that was invested in that. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other lights, then we'll move on then to the consent items, including the meeting minutes from December 10th. Payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, and contracts under $10,000. Construction bid request logs and travel. The 2020 graduation ceremonies at Rock Valley College. The Reliance Standard Life and Disability Insurance Administrator, TSA Consulting Group for the 403B Administrator. The Sun Life Assurance Company for the health insurance stop loss. The U.S. Bank Chromebook lease. The other consent items including the monthly cash and investment for November of 2019, the financial results for November of 2019, and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Second by Mr. Dixon. Any items from the consent items list that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Mr. Connor?
Items 7D and 7E.
Okay. Ms. McCullough?
And 7A.
7A, okay. Okay, then I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the consent items not pulled.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'll first take a motion and a second for item 7A, the 2020 graduation ceremonies.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Ms. McCullough.
I just wanted to comment, you know, many, many years ago, we used to do our graduations at the BMO Harris Center, and it was a magnificent opportunity for big space and, you know, up on the Jumbotron and the like. Moving to Rock Valley College has connected the dots, so to speak, that this is a next step going on to college. It's also a little bit of a smaller venue and made it a much more personal event. And I don't know, I've had only positive comments from parents and the way it's been handled. I sent a note to Mr. Dotson today, was really quick to respond, and I appreciate this. One of the reasons we started looking wasn't just getting out of, you know, a sports venue, but it was also they were escalating the cost. And so his department found and put together a contract with RVC. And the good news is, and this was my question, have they increased our cost for this graduation ceremony? And actually, it went down from last year. It was 21,390 2 years ago and 20,355 last year. And then this year's is in that same ballpark. It's just awesome. They treat us well, and I want to express my appreciation for the work that's done to put this together and to have it. And we actually also, on top of that, used to pay for Coronado for Roosevelt, right? So we also has that savings, even though we flatlined on what the cost is here. So I'm totally supporting it. I just thought it was good to have a little background. So thank you and appreciation.
Well, one of the comments I received from families is the improved access to parking at Rock Valley versus trying to find a place to park downtown. So a lot easier for that. So, okay, I'll have the coordinator. Any other comments or questions on this one? If not, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 7A, the 2020 graduation ceremonies at Rock Valley.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'll now take a motion and a second to approve item 7D, which is the Sun Life Assurance Company Health Insurance Stop Loss.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or comments? Mr. Connor.
Yeah, I pulled this one because just if somebody from the district, I know we do this every year, but just take 2 minutes and explain what stop loss is and why it's a good thing for us, because it's a fair amount of money. I mean, it's $1.6 million, and I think people should know why stop loss is a good thing.
Good afternoon. I'm Inez Harris. I'm the Senior Benefits Manager for the district. The reason why we have the health stop loss is because of us putting in place for any excessive losses with the health insurance. We currently have the $350,000 deductible, so anything over that $350,000 deductible, the stop loss reimburses us money, so it helps us from the high cost claims, basically.
And what, can you say anything about the differences between that and the 1.6 million that, on the, because that's the actual dollar amount side.
Right.
So how much do we save on that is kind of the question.
I don't have an exact figure right now, and I can't get back to you on that, but we are saving because a lot of the claims that we have had have been pretty expensive, and we do regularly stay on top of those so that we do get the proper amounts reimbursed.
Do you have the amount or an estimate? I don't think it has to be.
Year to year, it's hard to say. It's insurance, so year to year,
Right.
sometimes we pay more in premiums, sometimes we get less. Some years we've had over $1 million come back to us in reimbursements from the stop loss carrier because we've had significant losses based on large claims. We've had claims as much as $1.2 million for a single person. In those situations, $700,000 more will be coming back. So from year to year, it helps to protect like any insurance product. Some years we do well, some years we didn't. This year so far, we'll actually pay more premium than received back, but I believe last year was, and the year before that, we had significant reimbursements coming back in excess of what we paid in premiums.
Okey-doke.
Any other comments or questions? Now to have the coordinator then call for the roll on the approval of item 7D, the Sun Life Assurance Company Health Insurance Stop Loss.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'll now take a motion and a second for item 7E, which is the U.S. Bank Chromebooks lease.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Second by Mr. Dixon. Comments or questions? Mr. Connor.
This one I pulled, first of all, to ask a question of Mrs. Yar around the use of the banking. My question is not on the Chromebooks. Educationally, we need all this, so, and we've done a number of things about equipment upgrades, but it was really more about the banking side. So, Mrs. Yar, if you want to jump in there real
Sure.
quick.
CDW, our vendors really choose the banking that we use. So CDW uses U.S. Bank. So that is why this is in U.S. Bank terms.
Okay. So the issue that I brought up to Mrs. Yar, and I asked them to look into this, and it won't affect tonight's vote from my point of view, is that one of the things we've tried to do is use local institutions as much as possible. Now, I recognize that a group like CDW is very large, and we use people like that because they do give us a cost break on equipment. So there's some very practical reasons, and sometimes they have financial institutions that they use, and they do also get a break on the financing with that. However, I've asked them to look into, are there local institutions, a Midland or, whomever, and I'm not, really going for any particular institution, but there's quite a few local banks and financial institutions in this area. Sterling, I mean, there's just Illinois Bank and Trust. I mean, there's just a ton of them. And I would at least like us to look into seeing, number one, could we finance with somebody like that? My suspicion is it would be higher if we did our own financing, which is exactly what Mrs. Yarra said. But at least if we looked into it, the more likely tack would be to see if somebody like a CDW or whoever would bid on the equipment, if they couldn't go to a local bank and use that. And we have just for everybody throughout the entire facilities projects, many millions of dollars. We are careful to, for example, use local architects. So this is something that we've tried to establish a pattern to use local institutions absolutely as much as possible. So this, from my point of view, is consistent with that.
Mr. Rollins.
My question was more around the actual Chromebooks themselves. So this is only for a few of the schools. Is that because we're on some sort of a staggered schedule, or why is this just some of the schools?
These are school-based requests. So based on their inventory, they felt a need to purchase these computers. So the district, as we try to reset our inventory, the district, and Mrs. Detman can help me on this, the district is going to provide foundational level support to schools this summer with 50% enrollment. And then schools will have the flexibility to use their site-based money to supplement what the district has provided. So we have, this came up with other questions from the board around the purchase cycle. We have schools that have been, on their own cycles, each school individually. And so the life cycle of their computers are different from school to school, requiring different times to purchase new computers. So we're trying to get that systematized as best we can with providing foundation level equipment this summer, and then still allowing schools the flexibility to use their Title I dollars to supplement.
I'm just curious whether anybody has this number. How much are we spending per year on Chromebooks and Mac, iPads, or whatever it is that we're using?
Local dollars generally about 800,000, I believe, and then title dollars around another 400,000 feels right, but I can come back with a more accurate number. I don't have that in front of me right now. But much of this mid-year request, which you're right is off-cycle, is due to our attack in the fall. Some schools had some owned devices that were not on a lease agreement and were running on Windows 7, which is now obsolete. Microsoft isn't supporting that anymore.
I'm
so
painfully aware of that.
Yes, I know. It hits very close to home. And so we opened up an additional leasing opportunity for schools mid-year to try and make up for some of that difference.
Okay, so I was actually just curious about that number. So we spend $1.2 million a year in general on Chromebooks
I believe it's in that ballpark. I don't want to say that I have that number that is clearly in front of me between supplemental and local dollars, but that's in the ballpark.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Ms. McCullough.
I actually sent that question to Dr. Vosberg. Gave me two numbers, but they weren't for like last year. One was for 12-16, lease approved for $1.5 million. It was a 4-year lease. And then on 11/18, another for 849, $149,000, 600. But I was interested also, but our conversation, I really appreciate, we're so off cycle that we're going to get these in March. And so if it's a 4-year lease, do we not just want to wait for the fall? I wasn't sure of the whole thing, and so you were going to explain that, if you don't mind.
So, yeah, I had the same question, and working with Jason Barthel. They're working with the lease provider to make sure that we don't lose the computers mid-year at the end of the 4-year cycle. So that won't be an issue. We're going to have them for a little more than 4 years, according to Jason. And this, again, was precipitated by the tech issues in the fall, and then amending their Title I budgets, which needs state approval, which that process starts in November, so it does take some time to get that through. So we'd like to have them earlier as well, but we have to follow some federal rules there.
If we did one in November of 16 for 1.5 million, is that what we were paying each year on that lease, or is that
That's a 4-year lease.
the 4 years was for
Divide
the
that by 4,
1.5?
so 300 and whatever, yeah, 50, 60,000.
And I don't know about the other ones, if they were started mid-year or not, but I would want to know, Ms. Hoadley, that just, we have the word to Jason that they will let us, lease will go through the end of the school year, so that in March of years from now, I would want it in the contract. Wouldn't we want it in the contract? And so, before we vote on this, should the contract be amended to make sure that's in there? What do you think?
Are you asking me, or are you asking the people that
I'm
get the vote?
asking Ms. Hoadley, because she is our legal counsel, and she would be the contracts person.
I would think that that would be the best thing, to hold off and pull it for tonight if you can. I don't know. Dr. Jarrett, what's your thoughts? Because
I think I would
the contract is the contract.
I would recommend taking the risk, because it's already going to get late in the year. When I'm in faculty meetings, teachers are really feeling the pinch of not having access to those older computers. So I would recommend at this dollar amount that we would take the risk and work on the terms if Jason feels like that has been, these are virtually worthless by the end of the cycle. So I don't think there's going to be intense pressure for the company to recoup them. So it seems reasonable to me that we would operate in good faith based on what has been promised, because a 2-week delay for me would would further perpetuate real frustration in the building. But ultimately, I can respect a more cautious approach as well.
A way to amend motion and vote to say that yes, with the inclusion of
The terms?
end term being the end of that school year?
No, I don't. You could request that we try to get the contract to do that, but the other party has to agree, so that requires a negotiation. So I think if you decide to take the risk, I think there's also a provision, if I recall correctly, in there that if we don't turn the computers back, we buy them for so much pennies on the dollar. So that's already in the contract, so that would be the default. We can keep the computers, but we would be buying them in accordance with the contract.
It does also state, extend the term of the lease on a month-to-month basis.
Right.
So
So that's an option, too?
that's an option at the
Okay.
end of term purchase provisions.
But they're telling us we can keep them. I don't want them to hear what Mr. Rollins has to say.
Okay. Mr. Rollins?
I was just going to say, I don't know who told what to whom, but I mean, this is U.S. Bank. This is a lease. I don't think they're going to extend the lease without charging you an extra per month charge based on the lease amount. So at the end of the lease, you've got 3 options. You can extend the term of the lease on a month-to-month basis, which, I suppose if we want to get back on cycle, that's probably what we would do. we can purchase the equipment at the in-place fair market value and just keep it, or we can return the leased property to the lessor. Those are the three options at the end of the lease, and the lease is 48 months from the installation date.
Likely to be March. We're talking about a 2-month risk. I think a frame would be what is best for student achievement. I think waiting 2 weeks for the downside risk here impacts negatively the ability of what teachers want to do and having them access to their tools.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll have the
No,
coordinator call.
there's just a learning curve here, too. If you're going to do a handshake and a contract and say we're going to be able to do that, I think things should be done. Who of us are going to be here in 4 years? Is that our year that we're all up? In March? I think that bothers me more than anything, is the fact that we're having conversations and saying, well, we'll let you keep them till the end of the year, but I mean, Jason might not be here. Whoever he talked to probably won't be there. Maybe they will be there. But I think it's just good business practice to have it in writing. That's, I guess, the point I'd like to make.
All right, any other comments? Mr. Connor?
I mean, I understand the point. I think I'm sensitive to the timing question, and from my point of view, that's why, for example, it just didn't occur to me in terms of that banking question. Just sometimes we're going to have questions, and there's risk with everything, and you've heard me say it before, but I don't like delay. I think it's one of the things about government that makes me nuts. So I would prefer that we go forward with it.
Okay, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 7E, the U.S. Bank Chromebook lease.
Mrs. McCulloch? Sorry. Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We are now on to the closed session consent agenda items, including the following: the appointment of Renee Schott as a 12-month director of master scheduling, the notice to remedy for Kelly Gary, the HR organizational report and addendum, and the closed session consent items for student discipline. Unless otherwise modified below, the board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. Student 4344 is expelled for the remainder of this school year and all of the 2021 school year through January 14th of 2022. Student 4342 is expelled for the remainder of this school year through the first semester of next school year. Student 4345 is expelled for the remainder of this school year through the entire 2021 school year. Student 4336 and 4339, the expulsions are held in abeyance, contingent upon an EIA agreement for the remainder of this school year. Student 4337, the expulsions are held in abeyance, contingent upon an EIA agreement for the remainder of this school year through the first semester of next school year. And the 9-day suspension is affirmed for student 5016. And the following students are receiving EIAs. Bear with me, this is a long list. 1075, student 3987, 3996, 3999, student 8000, 8001, 8002, 8004, 8005, 8007, student 8008, 8009, 8010, student 8011, 8013, 8014, 8016, 8017, student 8023, 8024, 8025, student 8026, and student 8027. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Stanford,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
I do not have a report this evening.
Okay.
Thought we could take a break after the long slog of student achievement reports, but I do want you to note that while it has been postponed, we will certainly be having the early childhood report. It will be coming probably in late February as opposed to this month. I wanted to give the team a little more time to prepare and to put that report together because there's not an easy state report to churn out. So I want to make sure that it's a good use of our time and those are the proper metrics. But you can expect at next week's meeting, we will be diving into the special programs report with Dr. Saltis.
I would like to ask Ms. Detman to just give a summary of the Ready to Learn session press conference group that we did yesterday or the day
Just
before?
yesterday, I
Okay,
think,
are you okay?
right?
Thank you.
What day
I
is
think
today,
that's important
Tuesday?
for us to share with the whole board.
Sure, yes.
Okay.
So we held a press conference yesterday at Patriots Gateway Community Center. We chose that venue because our initial look at the data shows us that in neighborhoods with thriving community centers, we have lower vulnerabilities for children in kindergarten. We had our partners from the City of Rockford, Alignment Rockford, and Transform Rockford there, in addition to Community Foundation of Northern Illinois, who presented Alignment Rockford with a $70,000 check, which is the first of a 3-year installment to hire on a project coordinator to really be the hub for the EDI work. That work has 5 components. 3 of them are action teams or A teams, and they'll be going through the tactical solution design process through the alignment process, and we'll be working on kind of short-term wins that are really specific either to subgroup or geography, depending on where the data points us. We have 3 topics for that. First is early childhood transitions, so transitions from either home daycare or private or public early childhood into kindergarten. Also transitioning from home care into the EC experience. We also have professional development and education for parents and caregivers, and that would be everything from nurses in a pediatrician's office to social workers, caseworkers, early childhood teachers, et cetera. And then the third A team, which I can't think of at the moment. The second layer of work here is what we're calling community connectors. These are people who are involved in lots of different projects and initiatives across the community, and their role is to take the data with them everywhere they go and make sure that we're leveraging the data to make connections on projects that are similar and have similar goals. And then finally, a policy roundtable, and that's where decision makers in our community, like the mayor and the superintendent, will come together on a quarterly basis to discuss the impacts of policy level decisions on early childhood experiences and young families. So we kicked off that work. The website will launch as well, and we'll be able to see data neighborhood by neighborhood online.
I would just add that, Earl, did you have something that you want to? Absolutely, go ahead.
I typically try not to talk.
Okay.
But I would like to just say thank you to you, Ken Scrivano, David Siegel. You all have been at those meetings and participated in the process, so thank you for taking additional time to participate. Shout out to Kathy Bear back there. Hello, Kathy.
Yeah.
She put together the press conference yesterday and did a great job with that, so just wanted to recognize you all. Thank you.
I would just add, I'm happy to participate on that policy committee. If you need me, I'll be there. So happy to participate if you want me. Okay.
Yes, you're now assigned.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure. Okay, now we'll move on to action items. The academic approach was presented by Dr. Vosberg at our last meeting. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Dixon. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, on the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the academic approach program.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Stanford,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rollins,
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano,
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch,
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And we're now on to new business. Ms. Hoadley has the first item, the IGA Cooperation Agreement for Assessment Complaint Intervention. Explain that in 10 words or less.
And it really is fairly easy to understand. What happens is that all the taxing bodies, or the main taxing bodies, get together, and we divvy up the tax protest case and cases that come forward, and we defend the assessments that have been levied against the taxing, the entities that have been taxed.
Any questions or discussion? All right, this will be presented at our January 28th meeting for a vote. Probably should have my microphone back on. Okay.
All right. Good evening. I'm Dane Youngblood, Director of Purchasing, and I am presenting a consortium contract through NASPO, which is the National Association of State Procurement Officers. If you recall, I brought forward, I believe, 6 consortium in May for approval. I presented this in a similar fashion. This one will allow us to purchase from Snap-on Tools. It will help our transportation department save up to 50% compared to purchasing through authorized dealers. It'll allow us to shorten the supply chain and the timeliness of orders by not going through those dealers and go directly to the manufacturer. We will get better customer service dealing directly with the manufacturer of the products. And Snap-on also works with nonprofits such as CANSI to fund and support programs that help institutions like ours.
Ms. McCulloch?
When we participate in a consortium, do we do spot checks? Not on every item, obviously, that we buy, but do we do some sort of random spot checks to make sure that we're actually saving money? I understand the time and for time as well.
We do make sure
I thought part of it was that we were going to get better prices, like you just said, 50% off.
When we're reviewing requisitions, we do make sure that the quotes do reference that pricing so that we know that is the pricing we're getting. We do, from time to time, we bid out things like computers. We do see where that consortium pricing does compare to other competitive pricing, and it holds up. And that got me off track for a minute.
Yeah, a little distracting.
Lastly, we do verify that every single purchasing consortium every purchase we approve is a current contract that is active, has not expired, is the correct information. So we do spot check on the competition, the prices, but we do verify the validity of the consortiums we're using on every single purchase we make.
Understanding how you spot check.
We often get multiple quotes because we can, even though we don't have to bid. So we do see, for example, a lot of the IT stuff, we'll go 3-4 places, even though we're spending a higher amount.
Got
just
that
to
on
make
the
sure
IT
that's-
piece, but this was, we do use them for furniture. We've got a lot of things that we have access to through the consortium.
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Rollins?
So I just want to confirm, it looks like there's 2 different contracts. One's through Oklahoma and one's through Washington. They're both with Snap-on. One's for tools, the other's for garage lifts. Is that
Correct.
correct?
NASPO operates a little differently than the other ones where they want you to sign on to each state's contract because it is a state-oriented consortium. But yes, each of those state contracts allow us to purchase different items from Snap-on through the same consortium organization.
All right, thanks.
Any other comments or discussion? If not, this will come to the board for a vote on our January 28th meeting. Ms. Hoadley, you're up again on the recommendation on approval of contracts for the contract for facilities condition assessment and capital planning software.
Yes, I want to apologize in advance because Mr. Phillips is not here and he was originally scheduled to do this, so I will do my very best to articulate it as he would. So we are asking the Board of Education to consider approving a contract with Accruent to complete a district-wide facilities condition assessment. And that would include a 3-year contract to utilize Accruent's capital planning software. If you may recall, we've discussed the facilities condition assessment in other board meetings, in particular last year during the facilities update. So what the facilities condition assessment is it assesses and produces a life cycle and cost data of building components and building equipment. So that would include the bricks and mortar as well as the different electrical and plumbing and all of those other items that are part of the building. You already have approved the functional building analysis, and that is with our demographer. So what that does is it identifies the number of learners that can reasonably be accommodated in a school building by assessing the classroom size, the support space, the building schedules, the utilization rates, the programming. So that's one piece of it, of really looking at your facilities. The facilities condition assessment in conjunction with the functional building analysis will be used to really develop the next facilities master plan. So those give you all the pieces of information you're going to really need to move forward with the next plan. So the problem that, and that focuses on what problem we're trying to solve, which is gathering all of that information, including the replacement cost data, to accurately prioritize and create a budget and replacement strategies to address your facilities needs in the upcoming future. By way of background, most of you may recall that we did have a facilities master plan that was put in place in 2012. We're scheduled to complete that in FY22, and we did attach to board docs a lot of information included on where we're at in that master plan. But to put it in a nutshell, basically what we have left are interior finishes and furniture items. We've added a few things. For example, at Auburn, we have some pavement issues that we've added, so each year you've seen us bring forward some additional items, but by and large, there's some tuck pointing that's left as well, but by and large, it's really interior finishing and furniture. So as part of the plan, we added also programmatic spaces at high schools and elementary schools. We've opened 2 state-of-the-art elementary schools. We have demolished 9 schools and have addressed several of the deferred maintenance projects. So as the district begins to contemplate future needs, it's imperative that we have a complete understanding of the current condition and capacity of the facilities, and this would be done by outside experts. So we have looked at alternative choices. One, of course, would be to do it in-house, but we really don't have all of the capabilities to do particularly like the electrical and plumbing items, so the mechanical parts of it. We did have 11 entities, proposals that we received from entities to do the functional and capacity analysis. And I think Mr. Youngblood could probably speak to that process since he was intimately involved in the selection process. So I'll turn it over to him to give an update on that piece.
For this type of work, the school code through the Illinois Professional Services Act requires us to do a request for qualifications, which is a very, very quality-based selection process where you put out your invitation and your announcement, you receive proposals or qualifications, you review the best ones, you narrow down that focus, you pick one to enter into negotiations with. If you come to a successful agreement, you go ahead with that company. If you don't, you move on to the second one down the list. So it's conducted very much like a bid. We put it out to bid as such. We got 11 responses. We narrowed that down to 4. Of those 4, we ranked the top 3, and then we began negotiating with the top ranked firm at that time. Anything more specific, Larry?
No, thank you. The total cost of of what we're asking of the board to approve for the contract would be roughly $375,000 for the actual assessment, and then an additional $83,000. So you're looking at roughly $450,000 for both the software and the assessment.
Different number, we have different numbers. This one says 409,779 for the assessment.
Oh, we have continued the negotiations, so we've got them down from the 409 to the 374.
Okay, good.
So 375, so that wasn't updated,
Okay.
sorry. So we have continued.
105 on top of that?
It's now
Yes.
down to 80.
Yes, we've got them down to 82,539. Yes, for the software costs. So we have been negotiating with them to decrease the price and lengthen also the use and availability of the software. We do obviously intend to bring the report back to the board as we develop the next facilities master plan. We also have a process that we're identifying, and we'll be reaching out to the buildings to get input from stakeholders, including building staff. So I see Mr. Geffelin and Mr. Anderson here, and so we'll be working closely with their teams also to get feedback from the teaching staff.
Well, I've asked everyone to limit their questions to at least to no less than 10 questions per board member, so I hope you're ready. No, okay.
I'm sure Mr. Rollins will be happy to answer all of them.
Okay, all right. Mr. Rollins, you get to go first.
I think Mr. Siegel
Oh,
is
Mr.
first.
Siegel, you want to go first? Okay.
I noticed that the client shall be entitled to upload a maximum of 5 million square feet for the purpose of testing the SaaS services. Does the price of the software change if we exceed the $5 million? Because we are at, or 5 million square feet, because we're at 4,986,000, and I would think a 14,000 square foot margin of error is comparatively tiny. What happens if we skip over the $500,000? Does the price of the software change?
I believe that's part of the negotiations, but we'll certainly make sure when we bring the contract, the finalized contract forward, that will account for any minor variables.
Mr. Rollins.
So this, I mean, to me, this appears to be a lot like something that we've been talking about a lot over really the past 8 years about doing something like this internally. And I thought that we were doing something like this internally, and I thought that we had been shown spreadsheets with a lot of this
and those are attached.
information. So, you know, what are we getting for the $500,000 if we've already done most of the work ourselves?
So we have put forward, when we are looking at the life cycle of any equipment, for example, the roofs, we've given our best estimate on some of the roofs. However, I'll give you an example. For the administration building, the life cycle for this building was projected out into 2024. If that's the case, we would be open to the elements, basically, and have waterworks throughout. So this will give a better independent assessment of the life cycles of what we have. And it's not to, I think it will, and even when you get assessments like that, because I'm not disparaging our staff, when you get assessments, something can always go off. I mean, you look at when did you put a roof on, what is the anticipated age? Well, that being said, you're not always going to get that. But as I indicated, the other thing that they can give us is a lot of the mechanicals and electrical components that we don't have in this. It'll be much more comprehensive.
So I guess I am going to still go back to, I thought we were building our own database. Is that database going to be loaded into their capital planning software?
We will provide them that information, but they still will do the independent assessment.
Well, I'm kind of onto this capital planning software now. So is this something that we're going to load into their capital planning software? It will only exist on their capital planning software, and so, we'll be paying them $35,000 a year as long as we're using that capital planning software?
I don't know the answer to that question. I can find out that answer. I don't know.
Okay. If you could ask that question, if we could have that answer, and I would like to know, separate and apart from having them come in and give us a second opinion for $400,000 or $375,000, you got it down to, on the actual assessment. I guess I'd like to know also what the delta in benefit is of using their software as opposed to our software.
Well, I can tell you right now what we use is an Excel spreadsheet. So what they will provide is a more robust piece of software that will allow us to do costing and other types of analysis and reporting. So more sophisticated.
Mr. Connor?
My puzzled look is because I think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Rollins, that there was software that we had that was not Excel that actually tracked like the roofs and things like that. I thought that was actually one of the things that we had purchased, I want to say like 3 years ago, because we talked about it in the operations committee. So, I mean, I'm not going to argue kind of what's better, but I think the point is that all those reports we were getting, by flooring, by, tuck pointing and so on and so forth, actually was a software system I thought that facilities had. Am I remembering correctly?
You are.
I will double check.
Yeah.
I've only seen Excel reports.
Yeah, there's actually, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the software, but it was actually entered into. I can understand, to be honest, I can understand that it's probably more sophisticated in the capital plan and all that. I actually do kind of understand that. But I think Mr. Rollins' question is a good one in that if we're going to export data from those source systems, you'd have to probably have some means of either bringing it back. I would think, like Mr. Bartel or his staff, somebody should know if we have a way of, if it's not to import into that current software, if they had certain facts that we would have, for example, like a baseline that we would import and then we could track essentially from there. Because they probably have proprietary algorithms around how all this works together. That I understand. But typically the output is something specific like a baseline that you've talked about. So I would think that would be one question to ask Mr. Phillips is there some planning on both the software side for the export of that and that as part of the process that they would use some of the things we've already got as part of the inputs that they would use for the assessment.
Right. My
Does that make sense?
recollection is that we would get our data back out of the system, but I don't know in what format that would look like, but I'll verify that. The other thing is I'll look at what other software we have. I know we have Microsoft Project that they also use for planning purposes, but that's, again, that's a Microsoft
This
product.
is something different, and I'm sorry, I should remember the name of it because we spent a bit of time, but it actually, because one of the things that I remembered was that, because one of my questions was, are we going to tie into the financials so that we could kind of cross-foot what we've got, say by square foot or some metric. And I was told, well, we didn't really have that. That would actually be something I would think would be in this capital software. But again, that's what makes me think pretty clearly that we had some software system that tracked. You remember what it looked like? It said like, the average for the roofs is going to be 20 years, and it showed it building by building. The tuck pointing was every 8 years. I'm making up numbers, but that was the kind of reporting that I remember that being produced. So,
That might be part of school dude, actually. Now that
I
you're
honestly
mentioning
don't-
it,
yeah.
but I'll double check.
Okay.
I apologize.
Yep,
I don't
no
know
problem.
the answer off the top of my head.
Ms. McCullough?
Well, those life cycles were supposed to be on the website. I'm sitting here and I can't find them.
We did put them on, and then also they're attached to this presentation.
Where are they on the website? Mr. Dodson, do you know where they're at?
Okay.
Operations know where they're at? That was one of the things, all the time, money spent, that those would be accessible if felt like there was an issue with something, you could refer to that and say, here's your life cycle. We really pressed for those for years, and we got put off and put off and put off. I remember when we started the facilities task force, I'll have that for you by October, they told us in the summer. 4 years later, we still didn't have them. There was a lot of time and investment in personnel to put those together. And then we were told they would live on our website, and I can't find them. So if somebody could let board members know where they're at, that would be great. And so, although I'm hearing you say that they're probably not as good as we need to move forward. And that's why we're hiring these people to do the same sort of.
They're bare bones. There's a lot more that goes in, that's involved.
Mr. Siegel. I was trying to get to the website and look it up, but.
It's all good. Thank you. And I recall that software that we saw at the Operations Committee meetings actually had a really powerful graphical component to them where they showed, essentially an architectural structure layer by layer of each of the buildings with total square footage, what part was air conditioned, what part wasn't, what was the state, the age of the HVAC systems, the plumbing. There was a ton of rich data in our I was just going to say, Todd did show it to me, and it was an incredibly data-rich graphical statement, and not graphs like bar charts. It was the actual structures of the school done in layers. Do we know that we still have that as my first question? And two, if we do still have it and it's usable, will we be able to import the information that we get from Accruent into that? Because that just seems like such a really useful program to have. If you can go to your computer and essentially just lift up the roof and say, oh, well, this room, it needs furniture, and we haven't spent the furniture money on that room, so now we go do that. And then once it's done, you click it off and it's done. So will those softwares talk to each other?
I can't even say we have a software. I don't know about that, so I can check into that. I'll check into that. And Ms. McCulloch, as far as your question, it's the life cycle report is under if you go on your departments tab under facilities, and then it has life cycle 5-year plan 2018 through 2023.
And it's just as a little plug while we're looking, Mr. Dotson Jr. would like to meet with every single board member that he hasn't met with. He's met with a few so far to get suggestions on how we can improve our website.
There you go.
And so he would love to spend time with each and every one of you.
okay.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of big problems we can solve moving forward to make sure things like documents like this that are archived are easier to find.
All right, I'm going to let Mr. You got it? Okay, Mr. Rollins, I think you're next.
Well, if I can find it on the website, maybe it doesn't matter, but Mrs. Hoadley kept saying that it's attached to this presentation, and I'm not seeing it. Which of these attachments do you think, Mrs. Hoadley, is the life cycle?
There's There's a whole bunch of
Goodness.
attachments, I can tell you
If
that.
it isn't, it was supposed to be.
Okay.
So can I suggest that we have heard very clearly from the board that prior to approving this, there is a need for much greater analysis of what our current software capacity is and what current documents that we have, and that will be provided to the board before we ask for a second reading and approval.
Right. Mr. Phillips should be better. I am.
Let's hope he's not out for 2
praying.
weeks, yes.
Yes.
Deep trouble if he is.
Yes, he should be better by then and back
good.
for the next board meeting. So
Okay.
we can have it where on board president Scrivano's script where we can have a greater discussion before asking for approval.
Okay. Mr. Connor?
Yeah, this will be quick. In answer to Mr. Siegel's question, typically these software packages, if you will, don't, quote, talk to each other. That's very unusual. To integrate them is like having, French and Spanish, say the same thing, same way. Not going to happen. So it's usually data. So what'll happen is you normally export data, it's translated, they get it, and you get it back. That's normally the method on these. They normally are not integrated. So that's just a expectation that, I don't want to speak for Mr. Phillips, but I'm pretty sure he would say that.
There you go. Okay, so more to come on this one. Anybody else have any other comments? All right, Dr. Vosberg, you're next on the Illinois Resource Center.
Thank you. This is a contract for professional development for the Jefferson staff. Teacher Institute Day is February 7th, and they're using Illinois Resource Center to provide staff development to help work with their English language learning population. Jefferson High School hosts our English language learner program for Spanish-speaking students, and professional development will be given to help support the work that they'll do with those students.
So does this exceed the 10,000?
Okay, yeah, one more point.
Okay.
So it does not. This is a $2,900 and change contract, but we have other contracts with Illinois Resource Center, which this puts us over. We're
I
already
see. Okay.
early childhood uses them, and anybody else?
Right, so,
A few other of our departments
Okay.
use them as well. So we're over 10,000 for the year.
okay. That's helpful. Okay. Any other comments or questions for Dr. Vosberg on that one? All right. So our last item is our common one where we ask what action steps do we or administration has for follow-up, and obviously all the questions regarding the facilities assessment stuff and the capital planning software, that's pretty clear or whatever. So any other areas, Mr. Connor?
One thing that I'll do is I would volunteer to spend a little time on the facility side.
Okay.
So when Mr. Phillips gets better,
All right.
to contact me. I definitely, I was involved with this before, so I'd
Good.
be happy to follow up on this.
Mr. Siegel?
We had at the committee of the whole meeting, a fairly robust conversation about academic approach, and I don't want to rehash that tonight. But it also came to light that we had a number of programs and vendors supplying us with additional, curriculum prep. I'm wondering if there is a place where I can look to see where all of those different vendors and programs are compiled and what we pay for those on an annual basis.
Related to SAT prep?
Anything. So we mentioned 21st Century Community Learning Centers as well as this academic approach. Is there a total? Is there a list of all of these different programs that we use?
They come to you in bundles, so you get a summer programming that has all of the contracts that are extended summer. Then when you approve each school's Title I plan, all of those partnerships are detailed in those plans. The third bundle that you get is the Ill Empower. That's another set of dollars that schools use. And those, generally speaking, encapsulate all the supplemental programming that we do.
So what I'm looking for is what is the total number of dollars that we throw every year, not by season or by grade level, but just the total number of dollars that we throw at this at these programs. And it can be local dollars, title dollars, whatever it is we spend with vendors that help us with educational prep. So whatever you just said, you gave us those three different categories.
Yes.
It'd be interesting to see what the total bottom line is on that and what we spend above and beyond our day-to-day.
So increasingly, that is, our strategy has been to make that a site-based decision as opposed to, so we can, I guess, attempt to aggregate?
It's possible. In my head, I'm thinking the difference between an extended day program run by our staff versus something that we contract the YMCA to do. Is that what you're looking for? Is when we ask Burpee to come in and run an after-school session, or we work with Discovery Center to run an after-school session, or we work with Severson Dells for an exploratory, or White Pines. I mean, these are the things that we do on an annual basis.
Perhaps as we build this year's budget, as we provide site-based budgets, as well as looking at preparing this year's budget, we could naturally prepare some of that. Mrs. Yar, what do you think from a budgeting?
I will actually make it a lot easier. I will prepare an email tonight and send it to you, and I'll copy the board on just what it is that I'm looking for. Because I guess I haven't asked it in the most articulate way.
We can pull anything. I just want to make sure that we're narrow enough that we're actually getting to the outcome that you're hoping.
Right. So essentially, if you recall from a week ago,
Yes.
I essentially asked, well, why don't we just get a vendor for everything?
Yep.
And you said, well, we have this vendor and this vendor and this vendor and this vendor. And all of those things that you were listing off, those are the kinds of things that I'm looking to see what is the total spend on those.
Sure.
So it's outside help?
Yep.
Really?
It's outside help.
Yeah, okay. Not internal programs that we do
For
ourselves.
things that are in that category of SAT prep.
So you're looking just for SAT?
Nope.
No.
Just in that sort of
Got it.
category.
Academic
but generalized.
support.
I want it over everything.
Okay. So not.
If we have vendors that are helping, I don't know, make cookies, whatever. No, not really. But anything
we've
that's
got a
like
program for
that
that.
SAT prep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. McCullough.
I know that Dr. Jarrett just mentioned that we're going to have the presentation from the special programs at our next meeting. One of the things that I have asked about, and so I'm going to preemptively state it publicly, was making sure that we had a comparison with our regular programs. It is in there, okay. And also for the high school piece too, since there's a component in middle and high school. This isn't just elementary. Okay, so that we can see that 4-year span and hopefully have a similar format so that when we want to compare that we.
Okay. All right, very good. If there are no further comments or agenda recommendations, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Connor to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Siegel. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:24.